What a wonderful occasion this is. A celebration of scholarship and hard work. I want you to retain for a moment, actually for more than a moment, the joy and optimism that you felt from your achievement. Because I'm going to say a few negative things, but that joy and optimism is absolutely vital to what happens next. What I'm going to say is that Britain in 2023 is not a good place to be born. And it's not a good place to be a parent. We trail behind other European countries, and I will make that case. Why I'm honoured and delighted to have this honorary fellowship from Goldsmiths College is because the mission of Goldsmiths, from its very beginning, is to develop, foster well-rounded individuals to take their place in society. I'm much moved by the graduates in education and social work today, but we know Goldsmiths looks at the arts, creativity, science, other vital components of what's needed to create the good society. And my general proposition is that health and well-being tell us a great deal about how well society is functioning. And inequalities in health and well-being tell us a great deal about inequalities in society. And we are not doing well. There have been 3 recent major challenges to health and well-being: a decade of austerity, the pandemic, and the cost of living crisis. Pre-pandemic, the decade of austerity, life expectancy more or less stopped improving between 2010 and 2019, as I documented in my 2020 report. Life expectancy more or less stopped improving, and that slowdown in the UK was more marked than in any other rich country except the United States. Inequalities in health increased if we classify people by where they live and classify where they live by level of deprivation. The more deprived, the shorter the life expectancy, and that gradient got steeper. The inequalities got bigger. And even worse, over that decade, life expectancy for people in the most deprived areas went down. They got sicker. Reflect on that for a moment. We expect health to get better all the time. That's the implied promise of society. Things will get better, and that'll be reflected in better health. And over that decade, from 2010 to 2019, that wasn't true for people living in the poorest areas. And then it got worse with the pandemic. Albert Camus said that the plague would expose the rottenness of society. I wouldn't use such flowery language. I said that the pandemic would expose the underlying inequalities and amplify them. And so it proved. And then a cost of living crisis. Too early to tell the dramatic impact on health that it's likely to have. But if you can't afford to feed your children, if you can't afford to heat your dwelling, if you can't pay the rent, it's no surprise that health will suffer. And it all starts in childhood. I want to talk about the technical term intergenerational equity. fairness between the generations. What is this generation offering to the next generation? A warming planet is one thing this generation is offering to the next generation. Now, in one sense, what today represents is a breaking of the trend. Many of you who graduated today will be the first member of your family to graduate from university. So in a way, you're illustrating social mobility, coming from humble origins and achieving a degree from the University of London. Wow. But if we look on average, one way, forgive me now, I know you've had a long morning, but a little bit of technical language. One way of measuring social mobility is to ask, at the current rate of change between the generations, how many generations would it take somebody in the bottom 10% of income to get up to the middle, the median? In Denmark, it would take 2 generations for a poor person to become average. In Norway, Finland, and Sweden, it would take 3 generations. In the United Kingdom and the United States, it would take 5 generations. In Brazil, 9 generations. My bad news is that we're heading in a Brazilian direction, not in a Danish direction. Why? Child poverty, inequality, and what we spend on early childhood. In the decade from 2010 to 2019, if we measure child poverty as living in a household, you notice I've got notes, but who bothers looking at their notes? If you measure child poverty as living in a household at less than 60% median income, child poverty after housing costs went up from 27% to 30%. 30% of children growing up in poverty. What is it like in other countries? Well, if we use that metric and look at 41 OECD rich countries, we rank 31 out of 41, one being the best. So in Finland, Denmark, Norway, South Korea, 9, 10, 11% of children growing up in poverty, not 30%. We rank 31 out of 41. The United States ranks 38 out of 41. We're quite comfortable having our children grow up in poverty. Because we know, if you look at child poverty in Finland, before the operation of the tax and benefit system, it's higher than in the UK. The Finns are really screwy. They don't like their kids to grow up in poverty. So they use the tax and benefit system to lower child poverty. We don't. We increase it. What? And in fact, it's part of a more general point. If you compare incomes in the UK with, let's say, income in Norway, our top 10% of earners have about the same income as the top 10% in Norway. Our median, the middle in the UK, is considerably poorer than in Norway. And our bottom 10% is much poorer. The bottom 10% in the UK are poorer than in Slovenia, in Poland. We are a poor country with some rich people. And that has to change. Recently, the JRF and the Trussell Trust calculated how much it would cost to meet the necessities of life food, shelter, home heating, clothing. Universal credit pays 70% of what you need to meet the necessities. What we are saying as a society is that if you require benefits to live, we guarantee that your health will suffer. We've created a system that says if you require universal credit, your health will suffer because we'll only give you 70% of what you need to meet the necessities of life. And then spending on early childhood. Again, let's look at an international comparison. How much do we spend on children aged 0 to 5? The average for the OECD, the rich countries, is $6,000 per child per year. In Norway and Sweden, they spend $12,000. In France, $9,000. The average is $6,000. We spend $4,000 per child per year. The US spends $3,000. Thank goodness for the US. There's always a country that looks worse than we do. You've heard politicians say we're world beating at this and world beating at that. When it comes to looking after our children, we're limping along below the average. We're not world beating. Child well-being, measures of child well-being, out of 38 rich countries, we rank 27th. The US ranks 36th. Do we not care about the next generation? It would look like that if you look at what we do as a society. I would argue that you, graduates in education and social work, are toiling in the vineyard of social justice, of equity. You heard, thank you, that I chaired the World Health Organization Commission on Social Determinants of Health. When we published our report in 2008, The Economist magazine, newspaper, as it styles itself, had a 2-page spread on our report. I was quite pleased with that. But at the end of it, it said, it would be a pity if some of the Commission's saner recommendations got lost behind their quixotic commitment to equity. I really like that, quixotic commitment to equity. Because I promised myself when I started chairing the WHO Commission on Social Determinants of Health that I would read Don Quixote in English, not in Spanish. And I did. And I thought it was hugely appropriate. The idea of somebody wakes up and imagines himself a medieval knight running around doing chivalrous deeds, and everybody's laughing at him. And I thought, yep, that's me. And I said this to the Spanish Minister of Health. And he said, remember Sancho Panza, the faithful companion? He said, we need the idealism of Don Quixote the dreamer, but we need the pragmatism of Sancho Panza. So I say to you, my dear young colleagues who've graduated today, dream with me of a fairer society, but let's take the pragmatic steps needed to achieve it. Thank you.